Hey, this is Mark Facciani. Welcome back to another round of the Friday Fuel webinar. Let's kick it off. Going to share my screen and we'll get rolling. Okay, so this is going to be the third installment in the series. Today, the topic's going to be sales leadership building blocks. And quick background for those of you who don't know me, if this is your first time coming, I was a teacher and coach at the Pingree School for 15 years. I taught middle school history and was a wrestling coach. Then I had the opportunity for 7 years to join Tenna, where I got to lead both the customer success team and the sales development team. And in that second half of my time there, we really dialed in on the outbound channel. And the outbound SDR team ended up being that primary driver that got us from being a six-figure ARR company to a strong eight-figure ARR company. So based on that experience, I had a lot of fun doing it and had a lot of success in building that team. I decided in 2024 to found Path, where then my mission now is pretty simple. I help other B2B SaaS companies by designing the SDR program, hiring winning talent, and then ultimately training and coaching the team so they have a foundation for continued growth. That's what Path is all about. So, who's this webinar for? Who's Friday Fuel really designed for in terms of an audience? So, really, there's three different constituencies. Maybe you're that early stage startup, you're thinking about building an SDR team to accelerate, but you're not sure how to do it. Maybe you're that sales leader who's recognizing that I'm responsible for hiring and leading my team, and you think maybe you can get more out of it. Maybe you're just somebody who's in sales and you're looking for that perspective from the other side. Or maybe you're in sales and you're an aspiring sales leader. So if any of those fit, then this is for you. So today, I talked about sales leadership foundations. And so here's the key question that I'm going to dive into today. And this is really for the new sales leader, or maybe you're that CEO or that second level C-suite executive, and you're going to be responsible for new sales leaders. So, how do you make sure as a new sales leader you're spending your time wisely? That's the essential question today. And the reason I kick that off is because every new sales leader that I've met, including myself, had a couple things in common. They were an individual contributor at first, right? They were an IC, they did the job, they were in sales, but then they found leading to be a lot different. They have a lot to do. So, yeah, guess what? They struggle with time management. And then number three, conversations with team members tend to be a lot more challenging than they think. So, these were all my lessons learned and my experiences. So, today, I want to be able to leave you with three big ideas. First is thinking about the mission. The second is areas of impact. And the third is communication foundations. And one little technical note is throughout this opportunity today, if you have questions or comments, drop them in the chat. And then once I wrap up the teaching component of today, I'll make sure we get back to that so maybe we can have a more dynamic conversation. So that's just a heads up. You can do that anytime throughout. So let's dive into focus number one. That is the mission. So here's my belief. And again, this is based on my experience. It's also what I've seen in working with a number of different companies. A lot of new sales leaders struggle because they haven't thought about the mission. And so what do? They end up doing a bunch of stuff. They run around and they have all these to-dos on their list. And again, myself included in that group. And I think that, yeah, of course, there's a job description. Every single sales leader I've ever known, what's the job? Grow sales. You run an SDR team, book more meetings. That's a given. And so I think it's important to understand, why am I actually showing up in this job and what's my personal mission in that job? This is a critical component. And I think a lot of people just skip that step. So there's really two simple ways that I think a person needs to focus and develop that personal mission. First, number one, what is your actual mission in this role? And yeah, I mean, write it down on paper or type it out. So thinking about my opportunity, first time being an SDR team leader. So I've got this task, I've got to develop the department, and I'm running around with all these to-dos. And I had to step back for a second and think about, well, what is my role in this job? What's the true mission here? So of course, we're going to grow the sales function. But I realized as I stepped back, I thought about it, is that in building this department, what an opportunity that I had, what an opportunity the company had to build an entry point into Tenna at that time, where not only would we have, yes, team members that would come in and book a lot of meetings, but we would build a department where the SDRs that we were bringing in, they're going to be talking to more prospects than anyone in the company. And that voice of customer is going to be so important, and it was going to inform so much of what we did as a business. So why not, instead of just thinking about bringing in some SDRs, let's think about developing this as a future leadership arm of the company. So my mission then is to develop future leaders of Tenna from this entry point. Once that clicked for me, all of a sudden the job became a lot more powerful. And then part two was, what am I going to do every day to fulfill that mission? So when I come in and I show up, what am I going to commit to? I'm going to commit to a great attitude. I'm going to commit to bringing my best effort. I'm going to commit to being present and patient in conversations. So I wrote out my list of all the things that I personally was going to commit to in fulfilling that mission. Once I did that, I had a lot more clarity. And yeah, there's plenty of days where you're kind of struggling and you're kind of wondering what you signed up for. When you come back to the mission, it reminds you of the commitment that you made and the ownership that you have over making this opportunity to be the best it can be to help the company and to help these future leaders that you're responsible for. So number two, there's impact. Number two is impact. So now that you know the mission, you're ready for the next question. And it's the how question, because you might know the mission, but that doesn't mean you're going to manage your time well. So this is really the key question that I think once I figured it out, it started to become a great guidepost, and I became obsessive about it as a guideline to make sure that I was spending my time in the right areas and I wasn't wasting time. Because again, there's going to be a lot of to-dos on the list. So the question is this: how can I spend my time each day to deliver the greatest impact for the team? I'll say it again. How can I spend my time each day to deliver the greatest impact for the team? So again, I'll take a step back here, because again, just because you know the mission doesn't mean that you're going to execute it well. And this was absolutely true for me as a first year wrestling coach. Yeah, that picture is not AI generated. That's me, uh, third from the right, and there are 8 total people on the team. So I know that we're going to forfeit 6 weight classes every match. So mathematically, we're probably going to lose. And my mission was to develop future leaders through this sport. That was clear. But what did I do with my time every day? Well, the guy who's the second from the left in that back row, who's looking like a badass, Drew Gatewood, best wrestler on the team. So what did I do with my time? Well, I spent most of my time each day working with him a one-on-one. So I ran the entire practice. I was setting up drills. I would put the timer on. I'd blow the whistle. I'd run out and wrestle for a minute with Drew. Then I would run back out, blow the whistle, give the next instruction, and then the practice would continue. So I did this for the whole year. Well, guess what? Yes, we were able to develop leaders among that team. And yeah, Drew had a great year. He achieved his goal of making to the state tournament. But all of a sudden, you take it and walk into year two and you think about, how much did I develop my team? Did I spend my time in the right areas? And so I got this gift in year two. Right before the season started, I started seeing some floaters in my right eye. Those little specks almost in your vision. So I go to the eye doctor and I get the report, and they tell me I've got a partially detached retina in my right eye. So I'm thinking, okay, that's neutral to bad. Not great news for me. So I'm thinking, great, I'll keep an eye on it. We'll have some future appointments. And they say, no, no, no. You need to get this procedure done tomorrow to prevent a full detachment, which will be accompanied by an operation and a long recovery time. So I go do that. It's very unpleasant, but of course, the recovery is good. I get the prognosis that things are stable, but oh, by the way, Mark, your live wrestling days as a coach are over. Well, what an incredible gift this was for me because all of a sudden now I had to completely take another look at how I was spending my time. In essence, I became so much of a better coach because I then showed up every day thinking about not just how do I get Drew better, how can I spend my time to make sure that the rising tide lifts all boats and I spent my time in the right areas. And so I know that story was long about the coaching, but it was very impactful for me. And yeah, guess what? I forgot it again at the beginning when I was leading the SDR team. And then I quickly got back to the key question. What is the best way for me to spend the time that can have the greatest impact for the team? So what you have to realize is when you ask that question, it's going to change a lot. So just because you ask it once doesn't mean that in different phases of growth throughout your company that the answer is going to be static. So when I think about my time as an SDR leader, and particularly the last 3.5 years, there were a lot of high impact, high leverage activities. So at the beginning, when there was no one on the team, it was program design, talking to as many people as possible, getting a lot of input, crafting a compensation plan. Then it was recruiting and hiring. Once I had the vision for the team and the culture I wanted to build, I spent almost all my time going out and getting that winning team. Then, once that first group was in, there was onboarding and training. How could I roll out the red carpet to make sure that they had an outstanding experience and that they quickly were ramped up to then be able to hit their goals and hit the KPIs as soon as possible? Then it was coaching and elevating. So once they've kind of gotten out of the onboarding and training phase, how could we get them to perform even better? And then, of course, some of these started to layer in over top of each other. We then built in a next cohort and a next cohort. So now all of a sudden, I was splitting time between recruiting, onboarding, and coaching and elevating. At a certain point, then, once we got to a certain phase of stability where we had the team in place, we really thought about sales ops because, oh, by the way, you can't scale a team effectively and keep bringing people on if you don't have the leads right. So all of a sudden, a great deal of time went into not just diving into leads, but also getting the resources to help to manage the leads better and building a sales ops function. Then, of course, it was metrics analysis. It was now that of course, we want to keep getting more and more demos, but how do we get better? How do we convert at a higher percentage? What are those different factors that are going to make sure that those demos turn into quotable opportunities quickly and then close deals? We started diving into the numbers and trying to figure those things out and those nuances. Then, at a certain point, once we went from 1 to 4 to 7 to eventually 17, and there was a time when I no longer could, as my former boss said, I could no longer brute force it. I had to develop some other leaders. So then my time was spent in developing those 3 leaders to help them be successful and running their respective teams of 5 to 6. So you can see the answer to that question is going to shift as the business shifts. But by spending the most important time in the right areas, now all of a sudden I was winning the game and making sure that the team got better and better. So now there's the last component. It's communication. And we're going to get kind of granular here. So I know I'm kind of going from macro to micro, but I think that's really important in this progression. Because look, once you have that team in place, whether that team is 2 or 22, your success as a leader is largely going to come down to your effectiveness in communication. So if you struggle to communicate, you're going to struggle as a sales leader. I can't really state it any more bluntly than that. So this is something you're going to have to really reconcile and embrace. And if you want to lead in sales, you better be a great communicator. You better invest the time into your people. And you can't do this from a corner office without getting in the trenches. You can't do it without having one-on-one conversations that are deep. Sometimes they're going to be tough, but this is the necessary part of the job. So If that's not what you desire, and you really are someone that is really averse to communication, then my advice to you is don't lead. Find a different opportunity that can be valuable in the organization where you don't manage people. So at some point, your highest leverage activity will become your ability to coach the team because you've got to make sure that they get better and better. And obviously, that's going to differ depending on your structure. If you're in office all the time, that's going to look one way. If you're a hybrid, it's going to look a different way. If you're a fully remote team, that's also going to have a different texture. So, depending on how you structure your company, this is going to really vary. But given that, there are three main communication structures that I like to use to maximize time as a sales leader. And I think that this can be really useful for you because, again, we're thinking about the highest leverage points, but also to do this in a way that's most efficient. So let me walk you through three different textures of communication touch points that I like to use. So the first one, it's a pulse check. And this is the quickest and often the most effective strategy. So I'm talking 5 to 15 minutes maximum. If you've got that in office culture, you can do this by just walking over to somebody's desk. If it's remote, you're going to schedule a 15-minute block. And on a day-to-day basis, this pulse check is going to really let me know how they're feeling. Well, why is that important? Again, going back to basic fundamentals of leadership, if you don't care about your team, you shouldn't be a leader. And if you don't know how your team members are feeling, then you're not going to be really effective as a leader. You're not going to help them achieve their goals. You're not going to get them through their natural challenges and obstacles that they're going to have. So you've got to know how they're feeling. And yeah, from a practical standpoint, of course, if somebody's struggling, oftentimes it's going to be because something's happening in their personal lives that's going to dictate their performance. So you're also going to know what's top of mind for them on a strategic basis. So let me show you how I structure that conversation. So really basic start. How you doing today? You'd be amazed if you ask this question genuinely and you really pay attention to the answer, how much you can learn. You'll get varieties from awesome, doing great, to yeah, I'm good, to I'm okay. Those are three very different answers. And the tonality and the body language in which they deliver that is going to speak volumes. And obviously, if someone's doing great or awesome, I love to hear that. That's what you would want for everybody. But when you hear that latter response of I'm okay, I got to follow that up with another question. Be like, what's going on? Because that is not a throwaway statement. Generally, if I'm working with the team, I'm okay is not a great response. I kind of expect as a culture for people to be able to be positive. So okay, kind of equates with mediocre for me. And again, people are human. I'm not saying that anybody can't have a bad day, but if I hear that response, I'm going to want to find out why, what's going on. And honestly, you might spend the next 5, 10, or 15 minutes talking about something that has nothing to do with work. And you know what? That's 100% appropriate because, again, if you're a decent leader, you're going to care about what's going on with that person. So let's say that they're doing fine, right? They're doing great. Great. Let's get into business. So the first question is what's top of mind for you today? This is when you usually kind of get what their focal point is in terms of how they're going to spend their time. Maybe it's a particular geography they're prospecting. Maybe it's a particular point of contact type they're going to focus on today. So this is where I get to hear a little bit about their strategy and what they're thinking about. Then I ask this question, what else? So this can go a couple different ways. One way it could go is that they'll talk about a second focal area where now they're also going to spend their time in that second domain. You also might get a thoughtful pause, and then they're going to reveal, well, hey, you know what? I'm kind of struggling with this area, or I had a question about something. That's dynamite. I want to get beyond the surface and really understand what's going on with this person and what they're thinking about today in relation to the job. And with that, how can I help you today? Those two really might end up going together because the what else might naturally flow into that. Or maybe it's just going to be a reinforcement of they know exactly what's top of mind. They know what their number two is, and maybe they don't have a great answer for how I can help today. But I always want to offer that question because if I get the chance to give them clarity, then they're going to be able to move faster. They're going to be able to do better in their job. At the end, I always want to ask this question. Hey, what's your biggest takeaway from today? Because there's going to be something meaningful in the conversation, and I want to know what's stuck for them. And that to me is going to be something I ask every single time because I might think I know what the most important thing is, but guess what? I'm not a mind reader. And so this is often really revealing of what they're thinking about, what was most important for them. And you know what? That's totally fine if it's something different. It's just a reminder for me that I can't read minds and that I also get a pulse on what's most important to them about the conversation we just had. Document. This to me is something that I struggled with at the beginning, but it became kind of a staple of how I operated over time. So I've got a really quick tool that I like to use where I just kind of jot down some of these key pieces. What was their biggest takeaway? What was the topic we talked about? The reason I do that is because, again, I think I'm perfect and I think I've got such a great pulse on my entire team of 20. But guess what? When I have this check in again tomorrow, after 20 conversations, I probably may not remember what was the biggest takeaway from yesterday. I probably don't know what was most important unless it was a really memorable conversation. So, by spending no more than 60 seconds documenting it, again, I want to be efficient with my time. Now, when I come back tomorrow and I look at that, I've got a running log of all my conversations. And yeah, over time, I can also see what patterns are developing. Are we talking about the same things over and over again, either in a good way or maybe in a challenging way because something's not sinking in and we have to have a different kind of conversation? That's why I document. So, pulse check, do them as often as you can. Strategy number 2, the call or the demo review. To me, this is a little bit longer, but it's more strategic, and I can learn a lot, and I can really be valuable as a sales leader because this is my chance to be a coach. I would say these are usually about 30 minutes maximum, and it's going to let you know a couple things. Most importantly, it's going to be where they perceive that they need help. You may have a different perception, but you're really going to get an understanding based on the structure I use and the questions I ask where they think they need the most help. So what will I do beforehand? If I'm leading an SDR team, I'm going to ask them to bring a couple of calls. I'm going to say, hey, bring a call where you really felt like you found to be a struggle or confusing because you want us to dig in and tell me the reason what we're going to be listening for. Maybe it's you also want to bring a great call and you want to be able to dig in and kind of share what your thought process was. Awesome. But they need to select those in advance and then provide a reason for the session. And if possible, I want to be able to preview those beforehand because I might have an opportunity to have some thoughts in advance. If it's a demo we're reviewing, it'll be the same thing. So I want to have an opportunity to understand what we're listening for today specifically. So this way we can really spend the time most efficiently. And again, asking that question is going to create some ownership. Otherwise, you're just going to show up and then all that responsibility is on you. I look at this as a two-way street. My mission is to make sure that I do my absolute best to help this person become a leader and advance in their career at my company. But that said, I also want to make sure that even though I take 100% ownership in their success and their failures, if they succeed, then I feel as though I'm succeeding. If they fail, that's my failure. So I always come in with that lens. But that said, of course, there's acknowledgement that they need to do their part. So that may seem like a bit of a contradiction, but I want to make sure that they bring something to the table so they're prepared and they're conscious coming in. So in the call review or the demo review itself, I would say, first before we dive in and say, why did you choose this call or why did you choose this meeting? Again, it's just a reinforcement of what specifically we're going to focus on today. And so I'll ask the question, what do you want me to listen for, or what are we looking for in this review? Again, hone in on that specific detail. Openers, really, really big on openers. And that's true for the call review as well as that demo review. I want to stop I'll ask that question. Hey, what did you hear there? Or what do you, or if it's a demo review we're watching, what do you see in this first minute? Um, Maybe they're going to see and understand, and they'll be like, oh, wow, look at the body language of that POC. They look like an absolutely miserable curmudgeon. Or, hey, look at that right away. I can hear and see the energy and excitement in that person that's coming through. Same thing might be true on a call. Maybe it's that flatline, monotone hello and a long, uncomfortable pause. Or maybe it's the opposite, where you're catching somebody with some energy. I want them to acknowledge those moments because, again, the more people pick up on rapport and body language, the better they're going to be in sales. And these cues are essential. Some other pieces I want to see. Strategic questions. I think it's so interesting when you listen to a call or when you watch a demo that a person will ask a question and then oftentimes their response is going to be somewhat off topic. So anytime I hear that, I pause and I'll say, what do you think they meant when they said that? Because I may be asking a question about a particular feature or a function of my software, and they might have perceived it to be completely different, or they just didn't understand the question at all. And so, oftentimes, this is an opportunity to make sure that these pauses are really key, because if you're out of alignment, then that next question or the next part of the conversation, you're going to be having two different conversations. So I want to look at those strategic moments. Money signals, right? Positive signals. If it's a call review, I want to ask them, hey, when did you know that you had that demo? When did you know you were going to book it? If it's somebody who's closing a deal, or you could tell it was going to be certainly at least get a proposal out. When did you know they were into it? And hopefully their answer is going to be something different than the moment they said yes. Hopefully they're going to identify those winning moments throughout, because again, you want to be able to be in tune for those cues that are positive signals. To wrap it up, what's your biggest takeaway from today? Huge question. And again, I know that there are going to be some times when they have a big takeaway and I'm going to have something different that I also want to share, but it's really, really hard. It really takes discipline as a sales leader, because I know fundamentally, yes, there are some times where I can't hold my tongue and I have to also share a takeaway that they should have. But here's what I know. If the idea comes from them, they're going to be 5 to 10 times more likely to have that resonate and take away that learning. If I just give them the answer, they're going to say yes and nod. They'll either be receptive or they won't. But most likely, that takeaway that I provide is going to be less likely to stick. So I always want to ask the question, because again, I'm hoping that their biggest takeaway is my biggest takeaway. But guess what? It always isn't the case. And sometimes a difference of perspective is good. And again, I want to document. So last is the live block. This is the live action show. It's going to be 45 to 60 minutes. And I'm going to see what they're like in real time. And again, everybody at some point has to get over it. They're going to be observed, and it's just part of a good coaching culture. So set that foundation in advance of like, hey, I'm here to help you get better. And the more basic you and just bluntly you say that, the more people just have to be able to kind of understand that as an opportunity. If you make a big deal about it, they're going to make a big deal about it. And yeah, at first, they're probably going to be nervous, especially if it's the first time. But just come in, bring the energy, make it real, make it fun, and then of course the way you structure it is going to also make sure that once they do it, they'll realize, yeah, this was designed to help me. So structure going to be pretty similar. Hey, what do you want me to focus on today? And that could be whether it's a live call block where I'm just riding virtual or literal shotgun with an SDR making calls, or whether I'm going to be joining either as a collaborator or just in the background of a demo. Again, ownership. So during, a couple of things I'm going to look for. Number one is process or structure. What's the execution like? So if I'm running an SDR team, there's going to be a certain number of processes, and a lot of what happens before the call, during the call, and after the call is really essential. And so, the more I can get insight around their efficiency and their process, the better. Same thing with watching a demo. There's a certain way that I'm sure that your sales team is supposed to be doing it. And, that vision, you want to make sure that that flow of the demo is following the structure that's prescribed in advance. Second, I'm looking for clarity, and that's on a number of levels. First, can I literally hear the point of contact? That's very important. And then number two, what's the clarity like in terms of their ability to deliver the message, to listen, and respond to questions. This is really the nuts and bolts of any live or call review. And then finally, it's the next steps. As they wrap this up, then you want to be seeing what's the next touch point. If it was a call that wasn't a hang up, did they establish a next date? If it was a demo, did they establish that someone would be getting a proposal? So all these are part of the live block. As I realized I did not update my header here. Apologies on that. And of course, you want to document as well. Afterwards, what was the biggest learning? And make sure that you're going to be able to capture that so you know what their biggest takeaway was, and you can be speaking to that takeaway. Every opportunity is a chance to learn. Nobody's going to be perfect at first, but I think getting really passionate about that learning process is going to not only make you a better leader, but it's really going to help your team. So, wrap up on communication. When in doubt, communicate. Look, I gave you my 3 structures. You may have your own that really work for you. I found these to be the most efficient for me and the most valuable in helping my SDR team get better. So when in doubt, communicate. No news is bad news, especially on a virtual team. I think that the more you can be in contact and the more you can have those clear takeaways and next steps, then you're going to make sure that you're fulfilling your commitment to help your team get better and better. And again, communication should always be a high leverage activity because when it's structured right, it should have a direct impact on the team. So final note on time here, and then we'll stop for some questions and comments. So final note, there's always going to be some items you have to do each day, right? There's going to be that mandatory compliance training that comes in once in a while. There's going to be the one-off email. There's going to be a visitor that comes in. There's always going to be things on the schedule that you didn't plan for. And then in addition, I think that you got to understand, please don't go to your boss and say, well, Mark Facciani told me that these to-dos are not high leverage activities, so I'm going to ignore them. That's a quick way to be on the way out of your company. That said, if you do recognize and you're getting more and more astute at the results of how you're spending your time, and you're able to move your team forward in an impactful way, and you understand that, hey, you know what? You're getting some to-dos that are pulling away from these high leverage activities, then of course, have the conversation, do it the right way, and offer that up as your opportunity of how you're going to be able to help your team get even better. Always remember that every time you have these situations, be somebody that comes with a solution, not just someone that comes to your boss or comes to the CEO and lands a problem on their desk. So structure your days in ways that spend the greatest amount of time on areas that have the greatest impact. If you can do that obsessively every single day, I think that you're going to get a lot out of your team and you're going to develop those leaders in ways that are really meaningful. So I'm going to pause here. I want to kind of find out what questions and thoughts you have based on your experience. And what else around this topic does anybody want to bring up? So I'm going to stop the share here. I'm going to take a look over at my LinkedIn and see what questions might be coming up, if any. Okay. So I don't see any comments at this time. So I'm going to bring back the screen share and we're going to wrap it up. Okay. So last couple of slides, just to recap. Number one, start with a mission. Start with a mission. If you make sure that you spend the time in thinking about your personal mission, you're going to really show up in a whole different way to the job. And honestly, that's where your job becomes a mission as opposed to just something you do between the hours of 8 to 6 or 8 to 5 or whatever your time is every day. Number two, find out the high leverage areas and structure your days around them. If you do that, you will be really, really surprised at how much of an impact you can have because you're all of a sudden becoming extremely efficient and you're an agent of change. You're helping everybody on your team get better and you're doing it systematically. You've got the right structures in place because you've now chosen the right ways to communicate and document. So this way, all the specific details that are coming up for each person. And now the compounding opportunity of that is massive. So that's really the big three. So whether you're that new sales leader, you're that person that is responsible for sales leaders, or you're that person who's in sales as an SDR and account executive, and you want to be a sales leader, I hope these three areas were impactful for you. So as I always do to wrap up, I'll be doing this Friday Fuel webinar every 2 weeks. And I'll also have the recaps both on LinkedIn and YouTube if you want to check it out. I've got a weekly newsletter I call Make Your Mark, and that's really my thoughts every Monday on leadership. Also, DM me on LinkedIn. If you're curious and you want some of those PDFs on communication, I walked you through some of the key questions, but I've got some good PDFs around what those different communication types are like. The pulse check, the call review, and then the live block. So DM me on LinkedIn. Happy to share those with you. And then finally, maybe you're that B2B SaaS company that wants to be able to grow and you're thinking about, hey, I want to build an SDR team, but I don't know where to start. Or hey, you've got a team already in place and you know they need a tune-up. Reach out to me. I'd love to learn more about you, learn more about your company, and do what I can to help you get to the next level. So that's it for today, everybody. Thanks again for your time. And it's been a great opportunity to be able to come here and share these insights on sales leadership. Hope this was valuable for you. So tune again in 2 weeks, and I'll see you next time.